Kyle MacLachlan sits at a bar early in this film, nursing a drink, and a detective across from him asks whether he has a wife, whether he has kids. MacLachlan pauses for just a beat too long before he answers. Yeah, he says. Had the detective lets it go. The film moves on, because there is always another car chase coming, and most people watching for the first time barely register that exchange. They are still processing the opening 20 minutes, which ranks among the most relentlessly insane sequences in 1980s genre cinema, and they are thinking about the body horror and the Ferrari and the gunfire, not a single syllable at a bar. But that word had carries the entire film. Everything else is built around it, and if it slipped past you the first time, tonight is your chance to go back. Released in October 1987, on a budget of $5 million, The Hidden stars MacLachlan as a strange, slightly displaced FBI agent, and Michael Nouri as the detective who cannot bring himself to trust him. It delivers car chases, shootouts, a slug-like alien that crawls between human bodies through their mouths, and more gunfire than most action films twice its cost. During its theatrical run, it competed with Hellraiser and John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness and mostly disappeared in the noise, finding its real audience later on VHS, late at night on a rented tape, in a room where nobody was expecting anything remarkable. What it actually is, underneath all that noise, resists easy description. People who love this film, and a great many do, quietly, in the way you love things that located you when you were not looking for them, tend to struggle when asked to explain why it stuck. Tonight we are going to try, and we will start with the world the film drops you into. Because before any of that wordhead can land the way it should, you need to feel what Gallagher has walked into. Jack DeVries walks into a Los Angeles bank and opens fire. By every available record, he is an ordinary man, no criminal history, no prior incidents, no discernible motive. He strolls out, drops into a red Ferrari that belongs to someone else, and drives it through a police blockade at around 90 miles an hour while absorbing somewhere in the region of 40 bullets. He does not stop. DeVries reaches a hospital and he is dying, and while nobody is watching, something climbs out of his mouth, a slug the size of a small dog, glistening and unhurried, deliberate in the way that only something very old and very certain of itself can be deliberate. It crosses the floor and forces its way into the unconscious man in the next bed. That man disconnects his own life support, walks out into the sunshine, and heads straight for a car dealership. This is the alien. What it wants is not conquest in the science fiction tradition, no armies, no ideology, no grand scheme for the planet. Its desires are immediate and entirely recognizable. Loud music, the kind that shakes walls, fast cars, always the fastest available, food, cash, sensation, and when anything places itself between the alien and what it wants, it kills that thing and moves on. It is running a crime spree across Los Angeles not from strategy, but from appetite. Because it enjoys itself, because it can. And then Lloyd Gallagher arrives. He presents himself to the detective assigned to the case, Beck, played by Michael Nouri, as an FBI agent. And he carries the role convincingly enough on the surface. The badge, the quiet authority, the suit. But something sits wrong about him. Moving just a half second behind everyone else, he gives the impression of a person who absorbed the mechanics of walking by, watching other people do it first. The things he says land as technically accurate without quite sounding human. He knows details he should have no access to. And when Beck pushes back on this, pressing him on how he knew, why it matters so much, what he refuses to say, Gallagher meets those questions with those pale eyes and offers a single word. Please. Not a deflection, not authority asserted. Just please. The world surrounding all of this is aggressively loud. Blazing sunshine on strip clubs and record stores and car dealerships and gun shops, every location built for speed and transaction and surface gratification. Against all of that sits this one still figure, moving through it like something submerged, uncertain what any of it means but present, and not leaving until the work is finished. You spend the first half of the film watching him and quietly asking yourself what exactly is wrong with this man, and the answer, when it arrives, changes the texture of everything you have already seen. Jim Koof wrote the script and wanted to direct it himself, and when the studio refused, he walked away from it entirely. The pages sat there, fast and clever and structurally exciting, waiting for someone willing to ask what the story was actually about beneath all that momentum. Jack Sholder picked it up. Coming off A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which had performed commercially while leaving him professionally exhausted, Sholder found himself buried under every horror script Hollywood could produce, and he turned them all down. The head of production at New Line Cinema, a company he had worked with since its early days as a tiny indie operation handling trailers and re-edits, called him with something different. She was right to call. Reading Koof's pages, Sholder recognized a story about what it means to be human, narrated from the outside looking in, two aliens occupying human bodies simultaneously, moving through the same city, each wanting something, and the entire moral architecture of the film resting on the gap between what they want and the reasons behind those wants. He rewrote the script, not to alter the plot, but to reinforce the emotional structure underneath it. The detail that Gallagher's family had been killed came from Sholder. The dinner scene at Beck's house, with Gallagher sitting at a stranger's table and quietly taking in the evidence of a shared life, came from Sholder. So did the space around those quieter moments, room to breathe between the gunfire. Koof, whose record shows he was not pleased by the rewrites, went on to write Stakeout the same year. The film Sholder made is the one still drawing viewers nearly 40 years on, and Sholder himself has named it among his favorite projects. For the police station scenes he drew from Sidney Lumet, that specific texture of institutional fluorescence and low-grade fatigue that makes cops read as actual cops rather than movie approximations. He drained the film of blue tones deliberately, steering the palette towards sickly greens and jaundiced yellows that give Los Angeles a faintly diseased quality without ever calling attention to the choice. The score belongs to Michael Convertino, not a familiar name but a composer who understood exactly what he had been handed. The music never announces itself, never underlines the sadness or the action, sitting instead beneath everything and doing the quiet structural work of holding the film's two registers together, the relentless loud surface and the grief underneath it that never quite finds words. All of it matters because the film could so easily have stopped at the action movie Koof's original pages described. Those bones were already exciting enough on their own, and a version built only from alien slug, car chases and body horror would have entertained and then evaporated, the kind of thing you half remember on a Tuesday with no title attached to the memory. Sholder asked a different question. Not what is this creature, but what does it reveal? About the city it chose. About the bodies it borrows. About the being pursuing it across the galaxy, and what that pursuit is really made of. That question is why this film still has an audience in 2025. Almost everyone misses this on first watch. Gallagher is not a human being. The film confirms this eventually. It does not hide the reveal permanently, but it holds back long enough that by the time the truth surfaces, you have already spent an hour watching him trying to explain himself in language that almost lands, trying to drink a beer the way a person drinks a beer, trying to track the rhythm of a conversation with a detective who is, understandably, running out of patience with him, and then Beck, because the film is quietly generous, invites Gallagher home for dinner, and you watch an alien sit at a kitchen table with a family, his eyes moving slowly across the walls, the photographs, the accumulated ordinary evidence of a life built with other people. The film shows you, without narrating it, that Gallagher recognizes what he is looking at. A wife, a daughter, a home. He understands it because he had it. The parasite he is chasing killed his family on another planet. That fact surfaces in a single line during a confrontation, delivered by the creature almost casually, the way you mention traffic, the way you mention weather, and Gallagher does not erupt. He does not reach for rage. Instead he says, quietly, the name of a partner the creature left for dead on another world, and the creature replies, a mistake. And then they fight. What Sholder constructed around that one exchange is worth sitting with. A being who crossed the galaxy borrowing human bodies, learning to say please and learning to say sorry and learning when pushing harder will cost him more than waiting. None of that driven by professional obligation, none of it duty in any institutional sense. All of it driven by grief so old it has stopped feeling like grief and simply become the shape of the person carrying it. The mission and the mourning have fused into the same action. MacLachlan grasped this completely. His performance runs almost opposite to what a 1987 action film typically produces. Recessive, controlled, full of held breath. The performance of someone who has learned to inhabit a foreign world, not by mastering it but by paying extremely close attention to it. There is a scene where he tastes a slice of pizza and actually pauses with it, registering the experience the way you might file something away for later, and the moment lands as both funny and quietly devastating, because he knows there will not be much of a later. The body he occupies is failing. He arrived to finish something, and finishing it will cost him the only existence he has left, and none of that changes what he does. What the film never states aloud, what it builds entirely through performance and pacing and that single bar scene syllable, is that the thing Gallagher is chasing represents a question with no satisfying answer. Why did something this careless, this purely self-interested, take everything that mattered to him? The creature carries no memory of it as anything significant. It was passing through, it was having a good time, and there is something in that indifference which hits differently if you have ever lost something to a force that never noticed the damage it left. The Hidden is a film about what keeping going looks like after that, borrowing whatever you need, a body, a name, a badge, a city, and continuing, not because a good ending waits somewhere up ahead, but because stopping is the one thing he refuses to do. Very few science fiction films of this period attempt what The Hidden quietly does with its villain. The alien carries no motive that follows any logic. No ideology organizes it. No grudge against humanity in the abstract, no design for the planet it has landed on. It simply wants things, And the first thing it does after occupying a new body is locate a record store and find something loud to play, and the second thing it does is locate a faster car than the one it currently has. It functions in the most literal possible sense as an appetite that learned to walk. And yet Sholder gives each body it inhabits a distinct texture. Jack DeVries, the first host and the man behind the wheel of the Ferrari at the film's opening, carries the alien with a kind of cheerful contempt, laughing when the bullets connect, smiling at the police barricade, as though the whole arrangement strikes him as faintly charming. Jonathan Miller, the second host, is a quiet middle-aged man pulled from a hospital bed, and in Miller's body the alien moves with something closer to confusion, still calibrating, still working out what this particular machinery can do. Brenda, the stripper played by Claudia Christian, is where things get genuinely strange. Christian brings something to the role beyond menace. A dark performative joy, the alien in Brenda's body enjoying itself in a register that goes past the cars and the music into something almost theatrical. It plays to the room. The film watches this without judgment, which is the correct instinct, because stopping to editorialize would slow everything down, and the film is constitutionally opposed to slowing down. What Sholder is doing beneath all of this is using each host as a kind of inventory. Every body the alien selects tells you something about what it considers worth having. Fast cars, loud music, money it never actually spends on anything, weapons, sex, the ability to walk into any room and simply take. It arrived in Los Angeles and found a city that practically wrote its instruction manual. Everything on its list is available here, packaged and marketed and positioned at eye level, and the film never needs to point this out because Los Angeles does the work just by existing. The sun-bleached strip clubs, the car dealerships with red Ferraris in the windows, the record shops pushing metal at 11 in the morning. What the creature cannot access, what holds no interest for it, what falls entirely outside its range, is anything that requires time. The dinner at Beck's house, the patience of sitting with someone you do not yet understand, the willingness to say please to a stranger with every reason to reject you, and mean it, and hold still for the answer. The alien moves from body to body the instant the current one becomes inconvenient, because it has never stayed anywhere long enough to discover what staying produces. Gallagher has stayed. That gap between them is the whole film compressed into a single idea. One alien that takes and one that stays. One that discards bodies and one that treats the borrowed form of a dead park ranger. A man named Robert Stone, whose identity Gallagher assumed after the real Lloyd Gallagher died in a fire, as something worth honoring. He wears the name carefully. He keeps whatever promises come attached to it. He sits at a table and eats the food and tries, with visible effort, to be the kind of person Lloyd Gallagher would have been, despite never having met him. The parasite never thinks about any of this. That is precisely what makes it monstrous. Not the slug body, not the transfer sequences, not the body count. The blankness, the serene, unbroken inability to register that anything it passes through has a life continuing after it leaves. When the film finally delivers Gallagher his moment, he does not celebrate. He just finishes what he came to finish, quietly, and then he stops. And Beck has to carry what comes after. About 2/3 through the film, Beck runs out of patience. He locks Gallagher in a jail cell, because Gallagher has been refusing to explain anything for days, and Beck is finished being managed by someone who keeps saying please and trust me, without offering the truth behind either. In that cell, alone, Gallagher sits very still. The camera holds on MacLachlan's face, and you see for a sustained moment, the accumulated cost of everything he is doing, the performance of being human, the weight of carrying a grief that originated on another world across however many light years this pursuit has covered, the exhaustion of working without a language that quite fits the situation. He does not ask to be released. He does not argue. He sits in a borrowed life inside a cage and waits, because waiting is something he has become very practiced at. Beck comes back. Of course he does, because the film is also a story about what happens when someone earns trust by accumulation rather than by declaration. Beck enters the film territorial and closed. A detective who has built his understanding of the world on evidence and procedure, and the film watches him change not through a single revelatory confrontation, but through a long series of small proofs. Gallagher keeps being right. The thing they are chasing keeps proving itself real, and what reads at first as derangement gradually resolves into the honest strangeness of something genuinely not from here. By the end, Beck trusts him entirely, and the trust rests not on reasons given but on presence maintained. Through every refusal to explain, through the jail cell, through each moment where Gallagher had every opportunity to cut losses and leave, he stayed. The alien chasing Gallagher cannot conceive of this. The logic of staying, of caring about something beyond the next available want, simply does not exist in it. And that is the film's real argument about villainy, not the violence, which is spectacular and relentless and frankly great fun to watch, but the blankness underneath it. The pure inability to imagine that other lives carry weight. The two aliens share a city, and the film holds them up against each other and asks which one is more human, and the answer is not complicated. But Sholder makes you feel the answer rather than just understand it. and that is the difference between a film you watch and a film that stays with you. Genre films of this era generally close with the hero standing. The threat goes down, the gun gets holstered, and the camera finds someone who has survived and deserved to. The Hidden takes a different route, and almost no one who recommends this film prepares you for where it actually ends up. The final act relocates to a hotel ballroom. The alien has cycled through its hosts across the whole film and landed in a politician, a senator with presidential ambitions, and he stands at a podium before cameras and delivers a single sentence: "I want to be president." The crowd loves it. Gallagher watches from the edge of the room, sees the senator's tongue move against his lips in a particular way, the alien's involuntary tell, the reflex of hunger surfacing through the performance, and moves toward the flamethrower that security confiscated from him earlier. He walks through the security, he absorbs bullet after bullet and keeps moving, and MacLachlan does something in this sequence with his expression that is worth watching carefully. What crosses his face is not rage, and it is not the clenched determination of a conventional action climax. It reads closer to relief, the expression of someone who has been carrying something enormous for a very long time and can finally make out the place where he gets to set it down. The senator burns, the alien loses its host, Gallagher kills it with a weapon the film never explains technically, a device that produces a gold beam and simply ends things, which is explanation enough, and then Gallagher, his borrowed body wrecked beyond any further use, lies down. Beck is in a hospital, having nearly died in the fight, and in the quiet of that room Gallagher, Al Haig, which is the name he actually carries, transfers whatever he is into Beck. Not the hostile mechanics of the parasite, not the slug crawling across a hospital floor, something voluntary and careful, something the film implies was in some way we are not shown, asked for and agreed to. Beck wakes up, his daughter runs to him, and she holds him, and there is a moment where she looks at him, just briefly, with something in her face that suggests she registers a difference, that whoever came back through that door is not quite who left. She holds him anyway. Sholder has said he wanted to close the film on the idea that the being who spent the entire story chasing humanity's worst impulses across the galaxy chose, at the end of it, to become part of humanity, to stay, to fold himself into an ordinary life in Los Angeles, into a detective's memories and a detective's family, and live there quietly with everything he knows. The film denies itself a triumphant ending. No commendation, no celebration, no moment in the police station where everyone exhales together. The world continues exactly as it was, with a man walking out of a hospital into the California sunshine, changed in a way that nobody around him will ever fully understand, and finding that enough. Not victory, just continuation. The choice to remain in a borrowed existence among people who will never know your real name, and to decide that the life available to you is worth living. It is a very quiet thing to put at the end of a film this loud, and that contrast is precisely why people remember this ending long after the car chases have blurred together. For nearly 40 years, The Hidden has carried a cult following that talks about it the way people talk about things that found them at exactly the right moment. It circulates on late-night streaming at odd hours, and people stumble across it and immediately want to tell someone what they just saw. Tonight is a good night for that. The film moves fast enough that its louder, more violent passages never outstay their welcome, and the quiet moments hit hard because the film has done the work to earn them. What MacLachlan does in this role rewards a second viewing. He plays a creature assembled entirely from loss who has chosen, against all reasonable expectation, to be gentle, to say please, to eat the pizza, to sit at a stranger's dinner table and study the photographs on the walls and let himself feel something he has no name for. The practical effects, particularly the alien transfer sequences, hold up the way handmade physical things tend to hold up. They occupy actual space, they have real weight, and you feel them in a way that no amount of post-production can quite replicate. The opening 20 minutes will not release you. But stay for the quiet scenes. The film conceals its heart inside them, and you have to be paying attention to find it. Watch it tonight, and when that early bar scene arrives, Beck asking about a wife, about kids, and Gallagher saying, yeah, give that moment a second before the next chase takes over. Everything the film does after that is the cost of that single word. Leave a comment telling me about a film that surprised you with how much it turned out to be about. I want to know which one it was.